interesting stuff. So the real question about the prohibition is when was alcohol banned? And in COVID-19 times, do we have another ban of alcohol? And this was taken from a Mojo clip. I'm just going to show you right in the beginning of the Mojo clip. It's very interesting. You know, it's all fear, 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 jeopardizing their immortality and all of this. And this is exactly why prohibition didn't work. It's from between 1920 and 1933 that the American prohibition took place and was completely useless. Then we, of course, we go here where we were introduced to such wonderful characters, such as this gentleman. And we'll just take a look at this guy giving a lecture on teamwork. I think there's other things that like narcissistic, personality disorders, Of course, Robert De Niro is fantastic in this film, and so that's it. And so that's basically it. So this is a very interesting juxtaposition where he has a stick in his mouth, and he is also getting hit over the head. So it's very interesting, and everybody's here is smiling, and later on they will not be smiling. Okay, so very interesting thought process of what each one of these people represent, but this is not an analysis of a movie. And then this is our thought process of meditate or die, which makes me think meditate, especially in this case. So check this out. What is it which gives me joy? And I love this question because it has a direct relationship to meditate or die, because this guy thinks Al Capone, we know what happens to Al Capone in the end, is that what is it that gives me joy is baseball and teamwork, and yes, of course, baseball, and the superficiality of our societies, whether it's cricket or it's baseball, it is obviously something external, and that is what gives me joy. Great upbringing and great, excellent education that we get, but it's wrong. And the reason that's wrong is because it's external. It's and whatever is that is external, including these bodies, will ultimately be fleeting. So when was the prohibition? So it's interesting as far as the prohibition is concerned, and its extension into modern day alcohol policy, and how in India, this guy Abhishek Ghosh, they basically in March 25th, 2020, India went into complete lockdown, and alcohol production, sales, and purchase were barred with overnight prohibition order. They conducted an overnight analysis of 350 papers, and they said, look, man, you can't just put everybody directly into a withdrawal state. Don't do this. But I'm also sure that a part of this push for these 29 million, 5% that had hazardous consumption or were dependent on alcohol in India, this was a serious problem. So the issue in India is that, it's tried with this sort of these fear tactics of COVID-19 and alcohol, COVID-19, cigarettes, and the consumption really hasn't gone down with alcohol. In fact, it's actually gone up in COVID-19. And why? Because we haven't given anybody the actual training that's necessary. And if you were given the training in a point-blank fashion, very easy to understand fashion of step 1, 2, 3, 4, which we have done in our book for 99 rupees, and we want to bring it to the whole world because we think that it's worthwhile to bring to the whole world. And it's less than a bottle of alcohol for sure. And even if you are drinking alcohol, you can start this process very easily. The reason that prohibition didn't work, I would venture to say, is not because it was browbeating, which it was, and not because it was um, it was it wasn't a good notion. It's a good notion to say, hey, you shouldn't have alcohol. But the problem is that people want to enjoy, and that tendency to enjoy is a of our nature. And then if you put the nature to enjoy up against enjoyment, that's where you will have massive problems. And when people have option A, B, and C, and that's all they don't get option D, um, that's where the problem is. And so when they don't have option D and they don't realize what level of enjoyment you can actually go to, that's when you get prohibition and massive amounts of death. So I would venture to say that those people who were these people who were Protestants, they really didn't do a good job of trying to tell people about the ecstasy of a spiritual growth. So this guy, I'm sure, who was talking about this, and so angry seemingly about people drinking and whatnot. His anger was probably because of the fact that he did not have a good grip on explaining the ecstasy that he felt in his practice, or he didn't reach that state, or he himself was using. So those are the three conclusions that I can draw. You usually don't get very angry at a situation and try to browbeat people with these thought processes and try to convince them, unless you haven't hit an elevated state. Now, I was trying to look for some sort of uh, video on what are the elevated states um, of meditation, and what are these elevated states. So you can go from ruchi and all the way up to the highest point, or well, it starts off with bhakti, which is an individual, just repetition of words, and then it goes up into different levels. And there's different levels that people experience. And one very popular personality that has experienced these very high levels of ecstasy is none other than Jay Shetty. And Jay Shetty's, he alludes to these things in his talks, but he never opens up about these things because he doesn't want to basically sound like he's out there. But since I'm a scientist, and since we've actually studied these states of ecstasy under different levels of EEG, I would venture to say that it's okay for me to talk about because that's there. Another guy that talks about these elevated states of ecstasy in a very subtle manner is his name is Wim Hof. He does this also, and he's harnessed a different state of ecstasy by being able to control his body in cold states and whatever states to be able to make him perform better and live a better life, live a happier life, simply by controlling his breathing. And so but these are still altered states where it's sort of his gross body is now being controlled by these things. So it's really important to get a grip on these things, and it doesn't take that long. The idea that you need to sit down in the Himalayas and do this for multiple years is actually not true. And so we tried to create this video, and we were given a plug by, of course, Musair, and who's done an incredible job. And we give a plug, and especially when we're talking to trying to talk to alcohol, we talk about join our team, Go Run Go. And we try to talk about almost all of the different areas of addiction and the different areas that people can have addictions in. And these are three of those areas. In these areas of addiction, people can actually decrease their addictions simply by using their nature. And the nature is to enjoy and to find enjoyment. And that is in relationships. So there's a bunch of YouTube videos that are out there that talk about relationship and addiction, and addiction, TEDx, relationship. Let's go through here, and you go on and you want to look at this guy, and everything you know about addiction is wrong. And here is a gentleman who goes through and talks very profoundly without even touching on the actual subject, because he knows that this is about these things about addiction is about, who said, maybe we should even call it addiction, maybe we should call it bonding. Human beings have a natural and innate thought process of bonding. And interesting that he's talking about bonding. And when that bond is not felt, that is when addictions really start. When the bond is reinforced, that's it. And that is the nature of yoga. Yoga, it can be called to yoke, meaning to build a relationship between you and your higher self. And that is it. And that is basically what he's talking about. Now, when you try to, what I disagree with him is the relationships between you and other physical beings. Is yes, that's helpful if those physical beings are people or personalities that don't cause problems with imparting certain behaviors on you that would cause you to be re-addicted to things. So that's my 2 cents on the prohibition and why the prohibition didn't work, and why the prohibition didn't work in COVID-19, and nor should it. If I had it my way, we would hand out the marijuana, hand out the bottles of alcohol, and give people, the drugs up to a certain point, but also at the same time, make sure that they're trained. And people are generally, I believe, intelligent. I don't believe people are stupid. They're very intelligent because we have that innate ability to be intelligent. That intelligence leads people to do all sorts of things in order to enjoy. And that enjoyment, though, is what leads to their decrease in their emotional quotient and their intellectual quotient, because they are chasing things that have dead ends. And that's where it's unfortunate. It's like driving a car and checking every single cul-de-sac until you get to the road. Somebody's got a map, somebody doesn't have a map. So better to drive with